It's time for Talking Real Estate, and we're joined this week by Wes Davidson from PRD Nationwide in Horsham. Wes, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Nim's really well. How are you?
Doing fantastically. Now, I want to quickly chat about a record-breaking property that was sold last month in Richmond.
Yeah, Laidlaw House, which is famous because it was built by Peter Laidlaw from the Eureka Stockade, his son, Dr. Joseph Laidlaw. Wow. He had it commissioned for an architect from America, and it was built in the 1880s. It made $5.55 million. A place needs a bit of work, mind you.
Yep.
It's in Church Street, Richmond. It's a beautiful place if you ever drive past it. But it's a historical thing. The great thing about this is it sold to a local buyer despite overseas interest, despite developer interest. It sold to a neighbour down the road who's going to live in the property and preserve the history of it. So I think it's fantastic.
That certainly is. Now, we also want to talk about the growth, urban sprawl. Mm-hmm. It's actually moving away from the CBD, isn't it?
Yeah, the fastest growing suburb last year was Cranbourne East. According to the ABS, it had 88 people per week moving in there. And that sort of growth also then went out to the regional areas, which is what my focus is always on. And it was Bendigo, Ballarat and Geelong did very well. Bendigo and Ballarat averaging between 26 and 28 people per week respectively, and Geelong 3-4 times that. So Geelong doing very, very well. Watch Geelong, it's going to go crazy the next 10 years.
I can imagine. Now, we want to quickly touch on the rights of a tenant.
Yep.
What can a landlord do? What can a landlord not do? Could you give us a quick rundown?
I think the biggest issue for most tenants is what can the landlord do in terms of invading their right to quiet enjoyment. And there isn't a part of the Act that says a tenant is entitled to quiet enjoyment. What that means is you can't go around as a landlord and just help yourself and walk into the property whenever you want or do some gardening whenever you want. You have to go through the proper channels and serve the proper notices with the tenant and cooperate with the specified times that are in the legislation to make sure that you're being fair and reasonable. So you can't come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, for example. But where tenants sometimes get confused too is they confuse that right with the landlord also does have rights to enter the property. He has rights to enter the property through him or through his agent or a representative for the purposes of getting a bank valuation, for the purposes of a valuation generally, for the purposes of selling the property, so inspections, and a number of other things. So if those rights are invoked and the notice is served in the correct way, the tenant must let the person come through and comply, or they are actually in breach of the Residential Tenancies Act. So it works both ways. It's very specific. If you've got any doubts, go to Section 86 of the Residential Tenancies Act.
And if you want any more real estate tips, no matter what it is, you can check out this video and many more on the PRD website. That's prdhorsham.com.au. Plus, it's also on the Facebook pages as well. But Wes, thanks so much for popping in the studio this morning.
No worries.
We'll chat to you again next week.
Thanks, mate, and good job last week on the Royal Children's. Thought you did well.
Thank you very much. That website again, prdhorsham.com.au.